Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today with the InfoSec Girls Meet. And today we have a very special guest with us with a very special session on law data privacy. So, Suchi Pai is a data privacy and cybersecurity attorney with extensive experience in health data privacy, biometric privacy, incident response, domestic and international data protection laws, data transfers, privacy by design, technology implementation, and more. She has presented at several information security industry conferences like Security B-Sides, DEF CONs, Crypto Privacy Village, the Diana Initiative, SummerCon, and many others to name. And she's always happy to discuss about privacy and cybersecurity law. And the best part is that we can discuss anything about law with her. I met her only once, but as if we know each other for so long. Thank you so much, Suchi, for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk to everyone today. This has been a partnership that I've wanted to do for a little while. And like you said, Vandana, I always love talking about data privacy, cybersecurity, the law, and everything that comes with that. So why don't we dive right in? And what I want to do for you guys today is talk about how security and privacy intersect and are really intertwined. The general frameworks around the world for privacy and where privacy is probably headed in the next several years based on where it's been going for the past 15 or so, or more, honestly. So to get started, I'm sure you're all familiar from the security side with confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it perhaps surprises you guys not at all to know that CIA is actually really important for privacy as well. Privacy of information is protected when you have confidentiality, can guarantee the integrity, and you haven't made that data available to folks it shouldn't be available to, and it's actually available to folks it should be available to. And so whenever people talk about privacy and security in the US, they tend to talk about privacy and security as separate items. But when you look at the way the Europeans have done it, or the Southeast Asians or East Asians or South Asians in this case, it's the idea of data protection, which really encompasses privacy and security. And so knowing that as a security person, it's maybe important to you to also be able to figure out what frameworks you have to work in when you're engineering a new product or a piece of a new product, or you're working for security in a particular industry. And that's where the laws come into play. And so to put these like broad categories in, we have the US, which has this unique set of or unique setup entirely, which is often described as this patchwork of state laws and federal regulations. And then you have the European GDPR, and I'm going to say GDPR lookalikes, because after the GDPR finally came through, there were a lot of regulations passed elsewhere in the world that mimicked. And I think that's a similar case with the proposed bill in India as well, which I've been tracking for several years, or a couple of years. And it's trying to echo sort of the protections for people. And then you have East Asia and Southeast Asia, which typically include data localization requirements and things like that. Data localization and access requirements from the government that you might not see in Europe and the US and South and Central America. And of course, I'm neglecting Africa here, but that's because I haven't taken a deep dive in any of my work in any of the countries in Africa. So some of you may be able to speak to that if you've encountered privacy questions while you're working in security. So when you're looking at these frameworks, you have the weird setup at US, which is a patchwork setup. And what that means in the US is that if you're working in health security and health privacy, or health security, then you have to pay attention to federal regulations for health privacy, basic security standards that are sort of clear but not really, and then any state regulations that may come into play as well for whatever product or information collected, transferred, shared, processed by that product. Separately, if you're working in the financial industry, you don't have to worry about the healthcare side. And so when you're in the US, you typically have a team of attorneys that you work with, and they'll help navigate, like, what is this high risk law? What do we need to do here for the product? And what do we need to do here for the security? So that's the US. The EU can get very particular as well, because it has its definitions of data subjects, what's a data processor, what's a data contractor, data controller, and all of those definitions. So as you're looking at what privacy in the law looks like, what you're really looking at is, how is data defined, or how is information defined? And every country that's passed any sort of regulation has very specific definitions. So what's considered sensitive data or medical information or health information under HIPAA, which is the health sector federal regulation in the US, may not qualify as personal information elsewhere. This is unlikely to be true. It'll probably be roped into like sensitive personal information, but that's something that you want to know if you're working in security, because your job is to go back to that confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, so why did I tell you guys a lot about the frameworks? As information security professionals, you guys, or y'all, have the, I think, best opportunities to work across the entire world in your industries. You have your multinational corporations, you can pick up and move, you can work remotely. And that means you want to have some familiarity with what the regulations say and what you want to do from a security perspective to provide like creative solutions so you can actually have a product or service get off the ground without increasing the liability and risk for your own company. And knowing the regulations helps you prioritize how you're going to sort of attack the security. And I'll give you an example of that. So we're looking at, I'm sure you're all familiar with the French ethical hacker, Elliot Anderson. And I know that's not his real name, but let's just roll with it. And he had repeated looks at the Aadhaar card system on Android and pointed out several flaws. And so when you're looking at something like that, if you are working on Aadhaar from the get-go, then some of the questions I would think of from both a security and a privacy perspective would be, who needs to have access? Why do they need to have access? How do I manage third-party access? What is the sensitivity level of the data that I have in the database? And these are the questions that privacy lawyers ask and security people ask. And that's where the two intersect all the time, because when the security person is doing a risk assessment, the privacy lawyer is also doing a similar risk assessment. And where it changes is where a privacy person might say, hey, you know, this law requires X, Y, Z, but the regulator really isn't active. So even though the law requires all these things, we can run with the risk for a little while. And when we have more budget or more time, we can make sure to make that information secure or protected in some way more than it is now. On the flip side, you might have a privacy lawyer go, hey, security team, we really need your help with this data transfer, because the regulators are nuts and they're always investigating this particular type of data transfer. And then there's the other side where you as a security person might say, hey, privacy person, I don't think you really understand what's going on with this technology or what's going on with this service. And these are the flags we see with the confidentiality of this information or the integrity of this information. Is that a privacy issue? So the real question is, I think, when you look at law and privacy, where is the field going to go next? And what you want to look at is, over the last, I don't know, 20-something years, every several years, there's been an advance in privacy and empowering technical security. And it has coincided with, and sometimes come a little bit behind or lagged, with the evolution of technology. And over the last, I think, 3 years, we've really seen an incredible like exponential growth in technology that's just embedded in everything. And that can be your in-home property surveillance. It can be in the education system when it comes to monitoring test performance. It's in the healthcare system where you have folks using types of visualizations that are part of the extended reality world to overlay over patients. It's in the gaming world. It's in the defense world as well. And so you're seeing these like leaps in technology, and they're hoovering up more and more information. And people are reacting to this knowledge of such large data sets about them and this sense of pervasive surveillance in a way that's saying, hey, we need more regulations, we need more protection for privacy. So where we see the field going over the next several years is to more and more aggressive privacy protections as we're embedding technology more and more in our lives. And there was a really interesting write-up by Hypervisible, who frequently tweets about privacy invasive technologies. And the article was about his or Hypervisible's concerns for what looks like a tech segregated society where people will pay high dollar amounts to pay for surveillance technology like your Apple Watch and things like that. And then separately, you'll have people who are in US prisons with constant ankle monitoring, which is also surveillance. So you see sort of this class divide and financial divide between those two segments. And I think we're going to continue seeing that moving forward as well. So to go back to the basics, when you're working in a world that's becoming more and more privacy conscious, how do you set yourself up for success in information security when it comes to privacy and the law? And the way to do that is to be aware of whatever part of the world you're working in or whatever your country does. You want to have an awareness of three different things. One is what typically is required in the contract when it comes to security and privacy, because you guys are the security experts. And so you'll be the ones weighing in on those contractual obligations. And that's typically a discussion with your lawyers. So your lawyers might say, hey, we're going to put this provision in the contract. Does this reflect what the technology is going to do? And you should be confident and comfortable in saying yes or no, or we need to add this, and that'll actually meet the standards that are required by XYZ law. So you have your contractual side. You want to be aware of your sectoral regulations as well, passed by whatever legislative body. So in the US, that could be state or country, and that'll help you know what's overarching all of the requirements for security and privacy. And I think the last one to be aware of is where the court systems are going. Again, this is something the lawyers are more going to focus on, but it's really helpful to have that information for you, because then you can have a intelligent conversation with the attorneys you're working with. And when you look at judicial cases or a line of cases, it'll give you an idea or a flavor for where the courts seem to be going, and it's something that lawyers tend to key in on. So if it looks like here in the US, the courts decided that you have to show a particular type of harm after a data breach to actually have what we call standing, then you'll know that, well, if this data is affected, it's really unlikely to cause that kind of injury that the court's looking for. So I don't need to value it as much. And that's sort of a not privacy consumer friendly way to look at it. It's more of a company way to look at it, but it's still helpful for you to know. As someone who really advocates for privacy by design and collaborating and coordinating with security and engineering teams, I've always taken the perspective and tactic that the more privacy and options you can build in for your user, the better. And I don't mean options like overwhelming them with, hey, can I track you everywhere all the time and then like 100 pop-ups. What I really mean is giving people the ability to say, I would like to send this encrypted. I would like a copy of all of my information in a certain format. I want to delete this. This is wrong. Like all of the things that you see in GDPR are rights that I think that companies should provide willingly because users really want them. And if you meet the needs and wants of the users, then you've got a dedicated base for basically ever. So I think that's it on privacy and the law from me, and I'd love to hear any questions. I think you're muted.
Yeah, that's. I don't see any questions at the moment, but I am sure there are so many questions which are gonna come, and we do have people who check the videos later on as well. What I'm gonna do is, can I put your Twitter handle in the chat box?
Yeah, of course.
I think that's where they can reach you and they can connect with you.
Yeah, and I'm really delighted to answer any specific questions. I'm of course not anyone's lawyer, and I can't represent you, but I've always been delighted with connecting people with the right people to answer the questions or the right kind of material if you're looking for material to read. So if I can point you in a direction that's helpful, like, don't hesitate to reach out.
Sure. Thank you so much, Suchi. That was very, very informative. I think these are the things that we need to discuss, and especially the kind of social media etiquettes and laws that are coming up, health related laws that are coming up, and even privacy, especially around privacy laws. So much going on, and what to look at and what not to look at. Even here in India, there are so many things which are happening.
Yeah.
Which people are getting aware now, which are betterment for the society, but still it needs to dig deep, and how exactly we can understand what are the things which needs attention. I think that's is important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
you're spot on, Vandana. And if I had to boil it down to 3 things, I would say if you're looking at a privacy and a security issue, then what you're really looking at is a risk assessment or a risk profile. What is the riskiest? How do I take care of it? And then on top of that, for India especially, there is such an opportunity for people who are security technical experts to shape privacy right now that, the world is your oyster on this one. I would love to see a really strong and robust homegrown data privacy and security movement. So.
Absolutely. We are also hoping the same, and many more things to happen in future in a positive way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all the wonderful insights. Thank you.
Of course.
For joining us today.